In the vast, sun-scorched plains of prehistoric Africa, life was a delicate balance of predator and prey. Here, survival depended not only on speed, cunning, and cooperation, but also on understanding the silent language of the environment. Early humans, small and vulnerable, navigated a world teeming with threats, from stealthy big cats to opportunistic scavengers. Yet amid these familiar dangers, an unexpected terror roamed the open savanna, a terror that would rewrite the rules of the predator-prey hierarchy. Towering above the grasses, with legs as thick as tree trunks and a gaze sharp enough to pierce the soul, the giant ostrich ruled these plains with raw, unrelenting power. Unlike the modern ostriches, whose graceful sprinting can be admired from a safe distance, these prehistoric giants were formidable hunters in their own right. Standing more than 3 meters tall and weighing up to 450 kilograms, their size alone was enough to dominate the landscape. Their legs, ending in razor-sharp claws, were capable of delivering fatal blows to almost any creature foolish enough to challenge them. The ostrich's wings, though flightless, acted as balancing tools during their relentless charges, allowing them to pivot with terrifying agility across uneven terrain. Their eyes, perched high above the ground, offered a wide field of vision capable of spotting the slightest movements from hundreds of meters away. For early humans, who had relied on keen eyesight and careful tracking to avoid danger, the presence of these colossal birds transformed the open plains into a zone of constant threat. The relationship between early humans and the giant ostriches was one defined by tension and unpredictability. Humans had evolved as tool makers, social strategists, and opportunistic hunters, but the ostriches introduced a new variable. Unlike lions or leopards, which could be tracked and outsmarted through stealth or ambush, the ostriches struck with sudden and explosive force. Their charges were not limited to self-defense. They actively pursued threats when provoked or threatened. Groups of humans, often confident in their ability to fend off smaller predators, quickly discovered that their primitive weapons, spears, clubs, and sharpened stones, were largely ineffective against such massive muscular legs. One well-aimed kick from a giant ostrich could shatter bones, while a sweep of its clawed foot could rend flesh and muscle with shocking efficiency. The plains had become an arena where humans, once the hunters, found themselves outmatched and outmaneuvered. Encounters with these birds were catastrophic in the early stages of human evolution. Anthropologists and paleontologists have reconstructed scenarios in which early humans, while foraging or scavenging, were suddenly confronted by a towering figure in the tall grasses. The ostrich would fix its gaze on the intruders, evaluating whether they posed a threat. If provoked, or if it felt cornered, the creature would explode into action, its massive legs pounding the earth with such force that dust clouds erupted around its feet, concealing its movements. Humans, reliant on sight and sound to anticipate danger, often found themselves reacting too late. Groups of early humans scattered, weapons flailing, as the giant bird pursued relentlessly, exploiting every moment of hesitation and disarray. Survival was determined not by courage or brute strength, but by instinct, agility, and the luck of timing. The attacks of these giant ostriches forced humans to rethink their approach to survival. Unlike predators that hunted in predictable patterns or within defined territories, the ostriches roamed vast areas with erratic movement, making ambushes and traps less reliable. Humans could no longer simply rely on height, speed, or coordinated hunting strategies. They had to anticipate the unexpected. Shelter became more than a convenience, it was a necessity. Temporary camps were reinforced with barriers and sharp stakes, and humans began to develop rudimentary warning systems, such as coordinated calls and signals, to alert each other to the presence of these massive threats. The cognitive and social adaptations required to coexist with such a dangerous species accelerated the evolution of group communication and strategic planning, planting the seeds for the complex societies that would emerge much later. The physical adaptations of the humans themselves began to reflect this new reality. Anthropologists studying skeletal remains from regions where giant ostriches roamed suggest that humans evolved greater limb strength and endurance, traits necessary for sprinting across open plains while avoiding a predator built for devastating bursts of speed. Early humans became masters of deception, learning to mask their scent, move with calculated caution, and exploit the terrain to create barriers between themselves and the aggressive birds. They began to understand the concept of territory in new ways, recognizing that certain areas were too dangerous to enter alone, and that travel in coordinated groups dramatically increased chances of survival. In effect, the giant ostriches inadvertently trained humans to become better strategists, more aware of environmental cues, and increasingly reliant on teamwork. Despite the threat, humans did occasionally turn the tables on these colossal birds. Opportunistic hunting allowed early humans to exploit moments of vulnerability, particularly when ostriches were nesting or distracted. Knowledge of the ostrich's behaviors became a form of power. Humans learned the locations of nesting grounds, the times of day when ostriches were less vigilant, and the ways in which groups of humans could cooperate to herd, trap, or drive the birds into confined spaces. Successful hunts were rare and dangerous, often requiring intricate coordination and tremendous bravery, but the rewards were immense. The meat, feathers, and bones of a single giant ostrich could sustain a community for weeks, provide material for tools and clothing, and reinforce social bonds through shared effort. These hunts, however, were always a gamble, a high-stakes contest in which failure meant injury or death. The psychological impact of living under constant threat cannot be overstated. Early humans developed a heightened awareness of danger, one that penetrated deep into their cultural and cognitive makeup. Myths, stories, and early art may have emerged in part as ways to process and communicate the ever-present peril of the giant ostriches. Depictions of fearsome birds in rock art and primitive carvings suggest a recognition of these creatures not just as predators, but as forces of nature to be revered and respected. Early humans internalized the lessons of these encounters, creating cultural norms that emphasized caution, respect for the wild, and the importance of collective effort. The giant ostriches, in this sense, were both a literal and symbolic adversary, shaping human behaviors in ways that extended far beyond the immediate threat of physical attack. Interactions between humans and ostriches also fostered innovation. Weapons evolved to meet the challenge of taking down or defending against massive birds. Spears became longer and more durable, designed to deliver force without requiring humans to approach dangerously close. Sharp stones were affixed to handles to improve penetration and impact. Humans experimented with rudimentary traps, pits, and barriers, learning to manipulate the environment to their advantage. This process of trial and error accelerated technological evolution, as every encounter with a giant ostrich provided feedback that informed future survival strategies. Over generations, these innovations not only increased the odds of survival against giant birds, but also enhanced humans' capacity to confront other threats, including large carnivores and rival human groups. Yet the threat of the ostrich was never fully neutralized. Even well-prepared humans remained vulnerable, and countless individuals fell victim to the bird's power. Fossil evidence indicates that injuries consistent with claw and kick trauma were not uncommon, with deep punctures and fractures marking bones as reminders of these brutal encounters. The stories of survival were intertwined with stories of loss, and the collective memory of human communities carried the shadow of the ostrich long after individual hunts or attacks had passed. This persistent danger created a unique dynamic. Humans were forced to innovate, adapt, and cooperate, yet they also had to accept that some encounters would end in tragedy. The giant ostriches, in this sense, was both a teacher and a terror, a force that demanded respect and ingenuity in equal measure. The broader ecological implications of these interactions were profound. As humans adjusted their behaviors to avoid ostriches, other species were affected as well. The movement patterns of herbivores shifted in response to human tracking and avoidance of ostrich territories, and predator-prey dynamics evolved in unexpected ways. Humans became more mobile, their knowledge of terrain more detailed, and their influence on the ecosystem increasingly significant. The giant ostriches, by virtue of their sheer presence and dominance, indirectly shaped the evolution of multiple species, including humans themselves. In a paradoxical twist, the very animals that threatened early humans also